big platforms are making some changes to people disclosing that they're using AI to alter images or video or text. So this is what's happened so far. Let me run this through and then we can talk about it. AI generated election ads on YouTube and other Google platforms must have a clear disclaimer. This was announced in September and that actually started mid-November. And now YouTube is also rolling out new rules for content that's not political or social issue ads. It's just creators. They also need to have a disclaimer if they've used what they call generative artificial intelligence to make realistic looking videos. And if they don't disclose that, they may have their content removed or they might be suspended. And also as of next year, 2024, Meta, nay Facebook, also Instagram, actually Meta is both Facebook and Instagram, will also require advertisers to disclose when a political or social issue ad has been digitally altered, including using AI. One massive thing to note about that is those systems are going to rely on the advertisers themselves to make the disclaimer, and if the system finds out that you didn't do it, then there's a penalty, but there's no process on the front end, which is not ideal. So baby steps.
How is this going to work exactly? This change, which was announced on Wednesday, right on the heels of Election Day.
The key thing to remember here is that Meta is basically explicitly telling political campaigns, politicians, that they are welcome to use generative AI in their ads. Right. It's not like that for you and I when, as far as I know, you're not running for office. When we post something to Facebook or Instagram, we aren't allowed to use generative AI in a way that really manipulates, someone's words, puts words into someone's mouth, or creates sort of a false depiction of a real event. But Meta is saying that politicians can do that. They just have to hit a button when they're buying the ad that says, I'm doing this, so that users, when they see the ad, can sort of click on a button and see that AI was used to really manipulate the ad in a significant way.
Right. And this goes into effect next year, obviously, a big election year for us here in the US, but also a number of big elections happening all around the world.
There's also regulatory agencies are beginning to do the same thing in both the European Union and the United States. The SEC, for instance, recently did a request for information for all asset managers about whether they were using AI tools to assess investments. Now, some of these questions are kind of silly, right? Meaning using an AI tool for a variety of things, research for a paper. Did you ask ChatGPT about the causes of the War of 1812 is not fundamentally different than whether or not you used Wikipedia or whether you went to an encyclopedia before there was a Wikipedia. And it's certainly true that in many schools, you're not allowed to use Wikipedia as a source. And perhaps you won't be allowed to use ChatGPT. So there's that question of, we want people to do their own thinking for certain things that we've decided that demonstrating your own thinking is important. Problem solving and learning math equations, or critical thinking when looking at historical causation, rather than simply relying on someone's pre-digested answer set. That being said, using tools that are just integrated into the tool set of how we find knowledge, AI is just a different version of that. Meaning we use the web to search out information. AI tools will actually just make it much easier to find that information. What you then do with it, and whether you disclose it, I guess is a question for the areas that I've just talked about, and probably for some of the areas that you're saying that the tech companies are now saying have to be disclosed, so that you know whether or not this is a human or a bot. Although some of it doesn't matter. Like I don't care if I'm being served up an ad for shoes. I don't really care whether a human being created a program to serve that ad up to me, or whether an AI program created a program to serve up that ad to me.
No, not so much shoes. I don't think people really care about shoes, unless they're like altering the shoes to be like they look completely different than they actually are. All of these changes have to do with political and social issue ads, so that they're specifically targeting things that are going to put Joe Biden's face on something and say that he's like, let's shoot all the veterans, or Trump doing something, or Kamala Harris or whatever. So I think for those things, we do really care to know if something's been altered. I guess what I'm wondering is like, it's kind of the same question that's been coming up with community notes on Twitter with the Israel-Palestine conflict, is that depending on how you look at it, community notes has been doing an amazing job or a terrible job. A lot of this misinformation goes around and around and around, and eventually a community notes is appended to it saying this isn't real. And so anyone who sees it after that point will know it's not real, but there's also like millions of people who saw it before then. So I kind of think that this is Facebook and Instagram's and YouTube's version of that, and how prominent the disclaimer is going to be, and how far something gets before it's flagged by the system, I think are important and not answered questions.
Yes, and these companies have been thinking about this well before the past months in terms of the generative capacity of AI to create both false imagery and false information is massive and needs to somehow be flagged and policed before people lose any distinction between fake imagery and real imagery, or fake information and real information. And look, to some degree, it's going to come down to individuals being skeptical of what they see and hear, and doing some of what you just did with statistics of infant mortality, but doing that with, if I see someone, a public figure, saying something, are they actually saying it, or was that generated? And that puts an extra burden on all of us, and kind of creates a, I suppose, less desirable world of constant skepticism of everything we see and hear. But I think other than that, we would be lost. Like, we do actually now have to be skeptical of anything we see and hear. And I don't mean skeptical, cynical. I just mean skeptical as in, back to that question we were talking about before, always asking, is it true? And that muscle has to just be part of the way in which we digest and integrate information going forward. And once that muscle is natural and automatic, I don't think it's any more problematic than the instinct to breathe, right? We just breathe. We don't have to think about breathing. We have to question what we see and hear. Full stop. And that doesn't need to be a burden, although it may be a burden initially, particularly if you're habituated to accepting what you see and hear.